Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, to be held June 5th, 2018 at 6 p.m. Deputy Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Althouse.
Here.
Councilmember Norman.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Hauerge. Here. Councilmember Henry.
Here.
Vice Mayor Allen.
Here.
And Mayor Linsky.
Here, thank you. Okay, please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, up next on the agenda is a brief summary of current events by Mayor, City Council, and/or City Manager. The public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take legal action on any matter brought up during the summary, unless the specific matter is properly noticed for legal action. Are there any council members that would like to report anything?
Yes, I just wanted to report that on Memorial Day, the Saturday before, we did, the Military Service Park Committee did a biannual change of the flags, where we retire the old flags and bring the new ones up. It was a very, very pretty ceremony. It was nice. The mayor was there to speak, and it just was a real pleasure to be part of that service. And then following that on Monday, the VFW hosted a ceremony at the Cottonwood Cemetery. It was a very touching ceremony to honor all those veterans that we've lost, and I was honored to be able to speak at that ceremony. And also, I just wanted to mention the Verde Valley Medical Center that last Saturday, hosted the annual Cancer Survivor Day celebration, which is a wonderful event. It's extremely uplifting. It's for family members of individuals that have survived cancer, the people that have survived cancer, caretakers. It's just a really incredibly sweet event to attend. When it comes up next year, I'm going to be pushing it because we needed more. We had a lot of people attend. A great meal. So please attend next year. It was just a really neat event.
Great, thank you. Any other council members? Thanks. I'll just report briefly that the League of Arizona Cities and Towns did notify me that there's an opening on the executive committee, and they're looking for representatives from different cities and towns. If there's anyone on council that's interested in being nominated for that, I would just ask you to get together with the city manager and submit your letter of interest to the league. Okay. And that's it. Do you have anything to report, Doug?
I do. Just a couple things. As has been advertised in the paper and on our Facebook page, we recognize that people have probably a lot of questions about the quality of our drinking water and testing procedures, and so we have organized two public forums. One will be scheduled for this Thursday, June 7th at 6 p.m. And the second will be Thursday, June 14th at 2 p.m. at the Riverfront Water Reclamation Facility. And we'll be able to go over all those questions that people will have. And we're anticipating that somebody will be there from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to help answer questions as well. On Wednesday, June 6th at 1:30, there will be a presentation of an exclusive bronze sculpture by James Muir titled Band of Brothers, and it'll be at the Cottonwood Recreation Center's conference room. And then on June 2nd, this last Saturday, the Nature Conservancy, REI Co-op, and Friends of the Verde River partnered up to host a volunteer event at Riverfront Park, Dead Horse State Park, and Tuzigoot National Monument. Activities and projects included trail building, interpretive sign installations, and improving the access at Pinnell and 4th Street. And this is really the first step in what we'll see a lot of activity in completing or beginning a good portion of completing the Riverfront Trails Master Plan. So we'll see some activity down there. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Okay, up next on the agenda is the presentations. We were going to receive a presentation from the MERCER group for executive search services for the recruitment of a new city manager. However, we're going to need to reschedule that for the 19th. So I'd like to table this item. And move on then to call to the public. And this portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council regarding an item that is not listed on the agenda for discussion. However, the council cannot engage in discussion regarding any item that is not officially listed on the agenda for discussion and/or action. So we have three members of the public tonight that would like to address the council. There are yellow forms, and sometimes there are white forms in the back as well. So please fill out a form if you would like to speak to the council, and we are going to limit you to a 5-minute time frame there.
I can't fill out a form, I'm blind.
Ms. Rodriguez, I believe that we have someone who will be helping you read.
To help me, thank you.
Yep, you bet. So we'll start things off tonight with Mr. Fred Piper.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and all your co-ops. I'm Fred Piper. I reside at 511 North Willard Drive. And for all of you that might be interested, next month I will have been in this Verde Valley for 93 years. I know a little bit about it. My theme tonight, I'm going to mention, is Mingus Avenue. How much longer are we going to have to put up with that before we get a road? It's been over a year now of all phases. To start off with, it's a cost-plus job. They don't give a damn what it costs just so they get their money. And they do, then they've tore up and hauled off. They put it down one day and haul it off the next. I've watched it. I'll give you folks some good contractors' numbers, like Peter Keywitt, Dale Fisher, Bobby Fisher, L. Benson Contractors. And if you really want to get some scabby outfits, go down in East Texas and get old Lady Bird Johnson's Ball and Brown and Root. They're the scabbiest contractors that ever lived. If they'd beat what they're doing up here now, what's the matter? Why can't we get a road done? It's been over a year. When I was with Peter Keywitt, over on the Santa Maria, we bragged a mile a day. This isn't even a mile. And look at it. And for anybody that thinks I may not be an authority on road building, I've been in some phase of road building over 60 years. So I know what I'm talking about. It's a damn shame to drive down through there and see what's going on. Very seldom you'll ever see over maybe 1 or 2 people out there with a shovel in their hand, and they're bending the handles. Now when are you going to get off your tail end, get a couple of pitchforks, get out there and see if we can't do something about it? I understand by the grapevine that they're supposed to be completed by the end of June. Ain't no damn way. Then they're going to be down here looking for more time and more money, and you'll give it to them. Why? They've drug their feet long enough, don't you think? I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Piper.
I didn't know you cared.
Well, 93 years, you got to get an applause sometime.
All right, up next is Ms. Holz, Ms. Carol Holz.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Carol Holtz, and I live at 1047 South Tonopah Drive in Verde Village 8 within the city limits. By way of transparency, I am the wife of City Council candidate Doug Holtz. However, the issue I want to address tonight has nothing to do with that. Our neighborhood has an issue with the pedestrian bicycle safety on and the condition of First Street west of Monte Tesoro to Chuckawalla, and safety issues on Monte Tesoro. In approximately 2 hours on a Saturday, we and a concerned neighbor collected over 100 signatures from other concerned neighbors. We have a presentation for council explaining these issues, and we're told by a staff member that we would probably be on tonight's agenda, but we are not. We're hoping to be on your next council agenda. The matter is urgent, because of its seriousness with likely liability to the city, and because Dr. Daniel Bright's school is opening in August as a K-8 school, putting more children on these streets with nowhere to walk but in the roadway. My purpose tonight is to make the entire council aware that there is an issue of major concern and to ask that you put us on the next agenda. Morgan Scott has met with us and another couple and has the information about what we are seeking and why. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, that's on the work session agenda for June 12th.
Okay, thank you. Up next is Ms. Terry Gage.
Yes, my name's Terry Gage. I
Evening.
live at 1411 East Gila, Cottonwood, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about the water issue. I must say I was very upset with a couple of things. One of the statements that I'm going to read is from the first article that was in the Verde Independent, and it says, coliform is an indicator of the water condition rather than an immediate public health concern. Well, if you spend some time on the internet, and I have, that isn't quite accurate. The statement really should more read, while coliforms themselves are not normally causes of serious illness, they're easy to culture, and their presence is used to indicate that other pathogenic organisms of fecal origin are present. Now that's a little disturbing, so let me read that. They are an indicator, but what they're an indicator of is that there are other pathogens of a fecal origin. I don't see how that shouldn't be of concern. And if you look into it, and I'm not going to read them all or go into describing them all, but there are 5 major variations of coliform. None of them are just simply things that you can come in contact with and walk away. If you happen to have any compromised immune system, illness, elderly, very young, your system isn't able to fight off these things that might not affect other people. So to have made a blanket statement, as was made, that at no time was the public at risk, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And how in the world are we to know that? If you look at the symptoms, and I will direct you to at least one article if you would like to look it up for yourself. The article appears in, on a website, Elizabeth Kilmarin, K-I-L-M as in Mary, A-R-E-N as in no, livestrong.com, has written a whole article, Symptoms from Drinking Coliform Bacteria in Water. Very often, it says most cases of any coliform, E. coli in particular she's referring to here, will result in only mild food poisoning-like symptoms. Even the Shigella, which I guess also does the diarrhea and simple flu-like symptoms, can also be part of what you get from drinking coliform. Again, most of these cases, if you're healthy, will correct themselves. They will resolve on their own. So they're not often treated with antibiotics. However, we're dealing with people in this community who aren't all just healthy and a picture of health. So how do you know that no one had any danger, any health issue from this? It causes urinary tract infection, it causes respiratory tract infection. These are all things that people have since 2015, if I'm reading that article correct. This has been going on where we're not getting accurate results in our testing. Things are being skewed in one fashion or another. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. I mean, I have a water bill here. This is my last water bill from the Garrisons, 2005, congratulating me for being a good customer. That bill was $11.90. This is my current water bill from the city of Cottonwood. $81.95. You know, I'm very upset that I pay so much for this water, and that since 2015, this was allowed to go on. I have another question for you. In this article from the Verde Independent, it says that we are to make note that this issue came to light this week only because criminal charges were filed against a city employee. Actually, this problem was resolved 7 months ago. In October 2017, the city entered into a corrective action, in quotes, agreement with Arizona Department of Health Services and Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. The essence of that agreement is that while the city will continue to collect samples for water quality testing, Cottonwood employees will be divorced from the testing process or documentation of the testing results. Cottonwood employees will now only collect samples. My question is, if you knew about it 7 months ago, why didn't we? And how did it come to your attention? Who brought it to your attention that you had a problem and that you had to have this meeting and you had to make these changes? I have other questions, so I'm going to read them quickly. I don't know where I'm at with my time.
Ms. Gage, I'm sorry, but you are at a 5 minutes. But we are having two.
I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Could I have 1 more minute to at least read in my questions?
Please.
Did Mr. Burnett's position as wastewater operations foreman allow him to profit in any way by falsifying these tests and by telling his subordinates to do likewise? Human nature being what it is, most people have to have a motive for their actions, especially if those actions are against laws or rules. What was Mr. Burnett's motive? I'd like to know. In what way did he personally benefit from doing this, if at all? In the way the water company is structured and run, who gave Mr. Burnett his orders? Who did he report directly to? In what way would falsifying tests benefit any member or members of the water department? What would the required follow-up testing for coliform have cost? Who is directly in charge of overseeing this whole water department itself? And if these tests for coliform bacteria were falsified, what other tests may have been compromised and how would we know? Thank you. I'm sorry to have run over.
Thanks, Ms. Gage. Your questions are valid and they're important, and I hope that you can email the council or the city manager directly and get your questions answered, which would probably be the best option right now. And I would encourage you as well to attend the 2 public forums that the city is putting on. That's this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the new reclamation facility down on Riverfront.
6 p.m.
And then again.
Next Thursday again at 2 p.m.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think it is important to clarify, which we have done several times, that there is no evidence to indicate that anybody was ever given contaminated water. It was a sample that was contaminated after it was removed from the water system. It wasn't the water system that was contaminated.
Thank you. Okay, up next is Ms. Rodriguez.
Hi. I have a couple of things. Number one, I was told that someone would nicely read these to you. I know I only have 5 minutes, so if he would read one. I have with me the report the lady was talking about from the health services, listing, shall we say, a lot. I just gave her a copy of it. I hope she'll share more information with me. If you could please read the one that starts July 13, 2017. And also, may I ask what I'm going to, if anybody responds to this, I know you're not allowed to, etiquette with blind people is you say your name before you speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Horton. I'm the city attorney.
Okay.
On June 13, 2017, an unannounced on-site inspection of your laboratory compliance of Department of Health Services testing of drinking water in adherence with Arizona statutes and regulations was conducted as a result of complaints they received. The Department of Environmental Quality is also working on the problem. Is there a written report from either agency stating the water quality available to the public? In July, the report to City Manager and the City Council, I think this is a typo, we alerted by both DHS and the Department of Environmental Quality regarding the deficiencies of the water testing. Was this placed on the council agenda? Is this report available to the public? Is the city's response available to the public? Will the public have the opportunity to ask the council additional questions? How will the city pay for the civil penalties assessed to the city by DHS, i.e., where will the funds come from if the city avoids revocation of licensing? Also, has the Department of Environmental Quality assessed any civil penalties? Who is going to oversee and be responsible for collecting water samples and specifically sending them out to laboratories? Will the public be kept aware of testing results in a timely manner? And what is the procedure you have that is currently in place? The newspaper article in the Verde Independent, May 29, 2018, said the city manager reported to the city council the results of this inspection. Are these available to the public? And Mayor, with your consent, I think we'd enter this into the record with Ms. Rodriguez's permission.
I'm sorry.
We'd enter the written statement that I read into the record.
Thank you, appreciate it. And I do have a copy of that report for anybody that wants to see it. I can give one to the city, as I've just given one to the lady that was before me. Okay, now if you please read the second one. How's my time doing?
I think, Mr. Mayor, as an accommodation to Ms. Rodriguez, the council
Please, yeah,
would
please
indulge
read
as
on. Thank you.
Okay,
I'm
wait a
reading
minute.
slowly.
Let me just, the first part of it I'll say. I have an unhumorous riddle for you, okay? I've already done it to Rudy, and here's my question. Name me 3 American presidents who were all born in the same year within 3 months of each other. Can anybody do it? If you can't, here's what they are. Donald Trump was born June 14th in 1946. George W. Bush was born July 6, 1946. And Bill Clinton was born August 19th, 1946. That's the beginning of my statement. The other part to it is, now read the next sentence, which has to do with Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking, who was not part of the riddle, born January 8th, 1942.
Now you can read my statement, please.
The reason for my riddle is I was born December 2nd, 1946. I have never been a former or sitting president or a disabled genius, but when I requested to have other elderly or disabled citizens allowed to receive rides from paratransit to come to the council meeting, I was told by Rudy Rodriguez that it was not physically possible. I was also told by other city council members that they did not want redundant questions during the 5-minute call to the public. I assume it was because they did not want to waste their valuable time having citizens' constituents ask possibly other forms of the same question. When I was told that they would pick me up as the spokesperson for the entire senior disabled community, I do not feel qualified to represent the entire community. I was able on Friday to email both Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Morrow a copy of an article from U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights section entitled The ADA and City Government Common Problems. The introduction, which reads in part, access to civic life by people with disabilities is a fundamental goal to ensure that this goal is met. Title II of the ADA requires state and local government to make programs and services available to people with disabilities. One important way to ensure that Title II requirements are being met within cities of all sizes is self-evaluation of services offered. Any suggestions the council has for people with disabilities to enable them to participate in council meetings, especially anything that involves public safety such as water quality, would be appreciated.
Okay, my time is up. I have both these articles. The council can have them, or anybody else interested in reading the fact that the city was broke 15 different statutes in their wallet quality according to the Department of Health. They're listed, they're numbered, and there they are. So if I can't read myself what they say, including falsification, there's a lot of them. The city council should have a copy of this. If they don't, here's one. And also the ADA, here's a copy of that one. I thank you for your time, and I do hope, I am planning, as I have already scheduled to go to the, actually Trump's birthday, for your information. I'm planning to go to the water one. Is that handicap accessible where we're going?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for your time, and have a nice evening.
Ms. Rodriguez, thank you. This is the mayor here. Thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate your questions. We'll make sure that get your questions answered.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I've already spoken to Mary Ann, and I put in a, what do you call it, to get the information I've asked for here.
Good. Very good. Thank you. Have a good evening.
And now, since I'm on the government's time with paratransit waiting for me, would someone please call Phil to come and pick me, their spokesperson, up? Because I was told I had to 6:30. If you lose any anger in my voice, I apologize. But water quality, with this ring here is from my 5-year-old grandson when we went to the fire department, and he found it on a cupcake and gave it to his grandmother. He needs quality water when he comes down to visit Grandma.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. I'm sure that somebody will assist you with your ride.
Those are for anybody that wants to read them. They're very interesting.
Now, folks, there's no more forms here in front of me for anyone that would like to address the council during call to the public, but you're more than welcome to. And seeing nobody else, I'll go ahead and close the floor to the public. And we will move on to approval of the minutes. Vice Mayor pointed out that the work session minutes of March 13 were included twice in the packet, and the September 28 work session was not included. So I think I just entertain a motion for approving the March 13 work session minutes.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion and Councilmember Pfeiffer seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the work session of March 13 minutes have been approved, and then we'll bring the other minutes back. Thank you. Okay, moving right along here, we have the consent agenda up next. The following items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests. We have 5 items tonight on the consent agenda. Item 1, dedication and acceptance of right-of-way over a parcel of city-owned property located at the southwest corner of 1st Street and Yavapai Street. Item 2 is acceptance of right-of-way located at the northeast corner of 17th Street and Aspen Street from Jeffrey and Jennifer Lura. Item 3 is acceptance of dedication of right-of-way at the northwest corner of 17th and Aspen Streets from Richard and Sandra Copeland. Item 4 is cooperative use of agreement for library materials and related services between Maricopa County and Baker & Taylor LLC through the Strategic Alliance for Volume Expenditures Purchasing Group. And last, item 5, memorandum of understanding with the University of Arizona Nutritional Network, UANN, to establish the Cottonwood Public Library as a UANN partner to provide nutrition and nutrition-integrated physical activity education to supplement Nutrition and Assistance Program, SNAP, eligible children and families. Any council member wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Any member of the public wish to pull an item? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, Vice Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Norman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda is approved. We move on then to new business. Item 1 is discussion, consideration, and possible approval of a notice of intent to increase the city's transaction privilege tax rates by 0.5%.
Mayor and Council, I'm Marie Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy City Manager. Today, before you have the notice of intent, commonly called the NOI, for to increase the city's transaction privilege tax by 0.5%. There's some background information. As you may recall, we went through a really tough Great Recession. And back in 2007, 2008, the previous council, some of which members are still on the council, approved a 0.8% sales tax to push that to 3% from 2.2. And one of the reasons, of course, was we took about a 30% drop in a lot of our revenues, especially our sales tax back then. And that was done to avoid any type of disruption in services for the city of Cottonwood. Since that time, we've gone almost 10 years without a sales tax increase, and our taxable sales last year finally matched those in 2007. Meaning that our economy, as a lot of people believe has recovered, actually took over 10 years to actually recover in Cottonwood. Wanted to also mention that by pushing our sales tax to that 0.5%, we're not obviously alone in the Verde Valley and the surrounding areas. As an example, in your packet, you have such areas as Camp Verde, who is already at 3.65%, and they have a sanitation and fire district. Mind you, let me backtrack on this one a little bit. If you call these communities and you ask them if they have a property tax, their answer will be no. And one of the reasons they say no is because they don't believe that some of their services, such as sanitation district and fire districts, is not part of their responsibility. The city of Cottonwood has always taken a different approach to the municipal services. We've always believed that our fire department is a municipal function, hence we fund it through our sales tax. So if you call them up, they'll probably tell you that they don't have a sales tax, but they actually do for a municipal function as the city of Cottonwood sees it. Chino Valley has that 4% sales tax, and they have a special district and they have a fire district property tax. Clarkdale, our neighbors here, they're at 3% where we're at this point, but they also have a general property tax and they have a fire district. Jerome is at 3.5, they have a general property tax. Prescott is 2.75, but they have a general and a bond debt service property tax, which means they have a primary and a secondary property tax. Prescott Valley is 2.83%, and they have a fire district. They're supported by Yavapai, Central Yavapai Fire District. Sedona is at 3.5, and we all know that they have a fire district property tax. Sholo is at 2%, but they have a road and street light property tax on the district that is sponsored by property tax. Payson is at 3%, they have a general property tax. And Cottonwood is at 3%, and we have no property tax and no special district or any secondary supporting any of our debt service. We support it all through our general fund. And of course, that is about 50% funded through our sales tax. In other words, it's very difficult to go out and match up Cottonwood to anybody else because we have always supported our services through just our sales tax, through predominantly our sales tax. Some of the priorities the council has mentioned to us that we need to take care of if we do increase our sales tax is we need to build up our reserves, which we know we'll have a downturn. It's just a matter of time. It's not an if, it's when it will happen. Recent economists that we've met with GFOAZ have told us that we're about 2 years out from the next downturn. I would hope it takes longer than that myself. We would like to, council has asked that we add additional monies into our street and other transportation type improvements, and also that we allocate some of our unfunded pension liabilities through any type of an increase that we have. And as you know, the next item on actually does that before we do any allocation to anything else. With that being said, you have a tax rate chart in your packet, and you also have the proposed notice of intent. The notice of intent itself also states that we will have a public hearing on August the 7th, and then again on September the 4th, at city council chambers, after which the council may choose to adopt the ordinance, and then it can happen 30 days after. However, traditionally, we don't start any type of sales tax or any type of increases at a mid-year, at mid-month. We traditionally postpone it to beginning. It makes it an easier cutoff for businesses. That being said, I'll go ahead and answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Rodriguez at this time? Okay.
I just have a comment. Someone came in to talk to me the other day, and they were talking about the sales tax, and then they said that they were in favor of a property tax, but they're employed by a large employer here in Cottonwood. And I said, go back and tell your bosses, or have them figure out, if we did a property tax, how much they'd be paying in property tax, and how they may have to lay off employees, because the property tax on businesses would be really, the valuation is real high. So they did, and their boss was not in favor at all of a property tax.
And that would not be an uncommon answer from especially businesses, understanding that some of our biggest businesses in town happen to be our Walmart, our 2 dealerships, or actually several dealerships, I shouldn't say 2, but several dealerships that we have in the area. And of course, property tax confines those revenues to the corporate city limits, not outside the corporate limits. The advantages, of course, to any type of TPT changes is that it's spread amongst not just the corporate limits, but those outside and those visitors that come in from outside.
Okay. Well, we discussed this at length at our last meeting. I think this motion here that's being requested tonight just solidifies our former, vote and direction of council or staff. So I don't know if there's any
like to
further
hear of the public.
Yeah. Okay. So, is there anyone from the public tonight that would like to address the council regarding this issue? We've got another issue coming up, which is the discussion and direction of staff regarding the proposed budget cuts. We'll get more into the meat of the matter on this budget and the proposed 0.5% increase and how to allocate those funds. But if there's anyone here tonight that would like to address council on the notice of intent, you're more than welcome to. I see a taker. Mr. Holst.
Linsky and members of the council, good evening. My name is Doug Hulse. I live at 1047 South Tonopah Drive, Cottonwood. What I would like to address tonight is I've been working with Morgan Scott in reference to the condition of First Street and the pedestrian hazards west of Monte Tesoro Drive. Morgan has attempted to place this concern on the agenda for tonight's council meeting. However, I understand it was pushed back to June 12th, and I believe Mr. Bartosh said tonight that it will be on the 12th agenda, and that's acceptable. But there's something I think you need to think about. The city only has $100,000 a year in your budget for streets and sidewalks. It's not nearly enough to even maintain them, let alone advance them. People opposed to the sales tax increase are screaming that the city needs to cut spending. And while I'm sure there are areas where we could cut spending, I have worked on budget committees in past years, and I've seen the budget cut pretty much to the bone. I don't believe there are any areas that can be cut enough to make up for the financial damage that the Great Recession has done to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we're looking for tonight here is a vote to issue this notice of intent. So I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the issuance of a notice of intent to increase the city's transaction privilege tax rates by 0.5%.
Second.
And Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Pfeiffer seconded it. All in favor? Should we do a roll call vote? Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Althouse?
No.
Councilmember Norman?
Yes.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Yes.
Councilmember Howergy?
No.
Councilmember Henry?
No.
Vice Mayor Allen?
Yes.
And Mayor Linsky?
Yes, thank you. Okay, next up is the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget discussion and direction to staff regarding proposed budget cuts, employee reclassifications, new positions, capital projects, increasing the city's reserve funds, pension liability paydown, and revenue designations.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Kirsten Linden, Accounting and Budget Manager. I have 2 slides because I'm going to keep this short. In your packet, you have a description of the proposed cuts and of what the intended reserves, and then money to set aside for streets and transit and for the contribution to pension liabilities. It's on the screen. We met with the mayor, the city manager, the deputy city manager, Helen and I. Helen is the budget analyst, to discuss what to reduce from the budget and what to put into the budget for the proposed sales tax increase. And we looked at all the requests that everyone had. And during the discussion, we found a few little cuts that could be made. And one of them was to decrease the merit from a max of 5% to a max of 4%. That should say is about $80,000 next fiscal year. But the total reductions would be $222,900, which gets us closer to having a balanced budget before we even implement the sales tax. Since the sales tax won't be approved until September, and it won't start, we had to take that initial figure we had given you and reduce it down to 25%. So that number is 1.8 million. And so in that, we have decided to of that, and 16% would just be reserve, set aside cash for future needs, and then we would do 37% to streets and transit, which is a total of $700,000, and then we would contribute an additional 10% of those funds to pay down some of the pension liabilities. That would leave us with 1.1 million, and, oh no, I'm sorry, but that's not right. The total allocation to streets and transit would be 1.1 million. And that leaves us about $400,000. And our suggestion is to do the reclassifications that are listed, add 2 personnel, one that does not cost the general fund any money. That would be a project manager for utilities, and that would be paid out of utility funds. And then to do 3 capital projects, some drainage work, metal detector at the court, which is partially paid for with court enhancement funds, and then a large diameter hose for the fire department. And then our suggestion would be for next year, 2020, would be to reserve almost 80% of that. Put aside 15% for reserves, 25% to streets, 20% to transit, 10% to pension liabilities, and then 10% for infrastructure and capital. We wanted to present this to you before we put it into the budget. The tentative budget is supposed to be coming to you on June 25th. So we'd like to get direction if you are okay with this plan so that we can put that in the tentative budget.
It was a tough, it was a difficult meeting because we obviously have a lot of different needs to fill, and many different requests from council, and I still think there's a lot of space between us on where we all stand on even whether or not to increase sales tax. So really I tried to do the best I could to represent all sides of this and bring something to council for your consideration. This isn't etched in stone in any way, shape, or form, but I hope it's something that we can work from on getting us closer to that June 25th deadline that we're also anxiously awaiting.
I'll speak if you.
Sure, please.
And I didn't put this in my email earlier because I didn't think of it until I saw this, and I was a little disappointed. One thing I have a question for, and Ms. Bartosh, this is probably addressed to you. Last year when we did the budget, and last year when we did the budget, we were told a person was retiring and that position would not be filled. And the reason that position would not be filled is because the position was determined that it wasn't needed, I believe, and that work could be done by Rudy, and I believe we also changed Rudy's title and salary range at that time. Well, my understanding is that person has decided not to retire, but my question is, why do we still have a position that we determined wasn't necessary? And this is very difficult to say in a small community, but I feel like it has to be said, and other people have brought it up as well. It's difficult to do. I mean, my heart's pounding up here saying it, and I feel terrible, but you have to treat it as a business, and it was a business decision. So I'm questioning, because in my opinion, that position, if it's not needed, could cover just about cover the reclassifications.
First off, I don't think I ever used the term that it wasn't needed. I think the way I approached that was that we had an opportunity to reorganize to where we could do without it. It's not ideal, but we could do without it. Secondly, he still plans to retire. For financial, personal reasons, he's had to move back the date a little bit, and we're working with him to identify what that new date is. But it's not too far off. So
I guess my concern is, things were cut, or, we have $252,000 in reclassifications, and I am not against, I believe these people do need to be reclassified because of the minimum wage increase, and so, but I feel like we've got to find a place to take that somewhere from the top and push it down, to the bottom, and it's tough, but we do have a lot of city employees making a lot of money, and is there any way to find some savings there? Was that looked at, Mayor? I don't know if that was even looked at.
I mean, everything was on the table. These are, these are difficult conversations to have.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. But you're right in bringing it up. I think it gets in. This is the first time this council's really gotten so far into the weeds on this budget, and a lot of the decisions that we're considering now are. We have 4 contract employees as council. Those are the 4 employees that we oversee, and a lot of these tougher decisions come down to, I believe, management decisions. So for us to start meddling in those management decisions it's a bold step. I don't know if this council is willing to make that step in that direction, but I think that those are responsible questions to ask, and I think your background and my background too, frankly, that's the lens through which we view this budget document. But it's a difficult place for council to be, and I'm not sure how far into the weeds we want to get into this, but I will say I think we will see a lot of savings through attrition in the next few years because of a lot of our upper management that will be getting closer to retirement, retiring out, and I think there will be a lot of opportunity for change and shifting responsibilities around in the city, and I think that we can see those savings, but a lot of those decisions are based on city manager, not so much on council.
I just wanted to know if it was looked at, because I think as a city council, we're ultimately responsible for approving the budget, and someone's got to ask some of the tougher questions. And those are the types of questions I'm being asked when I'm out and about is, you know, what about all these employees making, you know, 100K plus a year?
Yeah, I mean, these are very difficult questions to field when you're at the grocery store and people are screaming at you. It's very challenging. Completely understand where you're coming from.
I don't go to the grocery store.
Well, and again, I don't know how you're ever going to get away from that and remain competitive in the market. I mean, it's what the market calls for these days. So, you know, and I'm probably speaking out of turn, but there's a certain amount of reality here in terms of what pay levels are these days. And I just recently looked at the League 2018 survey, and, you know, we're really not out of line.
I would have liked this proposal to have greater percentages or allocations for reserves, streets, and the pension liabilities, and less for personnel, just because that is what we were focusing on in past discussions for the increase.
And I don't disagree. This was very much a juggling act of trying to satisfy a lot of different requests, and frankly, there's a little bit of tug of war going on as well. I mean, I'm not 100% comfortable with it. I don't think any one of us is going to be 100% comfortable with this. And I wanted that 0.5% increase to go to those three things that were expressed as very important to council, which would be infrastructure and paying down reserves and putting money aside for reserves and paying down some of our liability. However, staff has its own needs and requests, and so we did I'll call it a delicate tug of war and tried to present this to council. Now, again, this isn't etched in stone. If this council feels strongly that 100%, not 68%, if my numbers are correct, of that 0.5% should be allocated toward those three things, then we can make that decision. And staff will have to go back to the drawing board and make cuts in other areas and make that work for us. We're ultimately in charge of spending the money.
If I can comment now?
Please.
I don't have an issue with some of these items as far as reclassifications, et cetera. We have to remember we're a service-based organization. We're not out there selling a product. We are selling a service. And when we start reducing pays, when we start reducing merits, we're reducing the service, and we're going to start losing people. And that is far more expensive than the amount of money we're going to save by reducing a merit by 1%. Now, it's a feel-good thing for those of you that want to say, okay, we actually reduced the budget in some manner. But the fact of the matter is the repercussions of reducing that 1% are going to be felt for a very long time. And we've done that before. We've reduced other areas in the city, and we've felt the repercussions when it comes to the service. When we start losing employees, when it comes to attrition, you don't even, the amount of people that we will lose to go elsewhere for better pay will far outweigh the 80 grand just in the training that we have to continually do as people come in, use us as a training ground, and go forth. Police department, fire department had to deal with that for a decade as people came in, learned how to become a paramedic, learned how to become an EMT, got their firefighter certification, and went to Phoenix. I can't stress this now. Obviously, I feel passionately about this, and I think some people have a different perspective because of the type of businesses that you're in. So you do have a different perspective. Knowing that the city's face and the city's sole purpose for being is to provide service, and then turning around and laying it on the backs of those individuals that are actually providing the service, I think is not right. I understand the need to cut, but again, we're balancing the budget on the backs of the citizens who also happen to be taxpayers, who also happen to be the people that pay our salary. And yes, some of them live outside the city, but they're going to pay that increased sales tax too. So I can't stress enough that just let's, cut everything and take a merit away from people. And the psychological effect that it will have will be far more detrimental than I think the 80 grand that we're going to save.
This last year on the undesignated reserve council, didn't we spend all of that? And now the council's, I mean, not going to have,
We only budgeted 49,000 last year.
but we used it all.
I think you're thinking about the contingency.
Yes.
Oh,
Council
okay.
contingency.
Okay, yeah, I am. I am thinking about the contingency, and the contingency is still in there. So what is this undesignated reserve council used, typically used for?
It's always been put in the budget at 100,000 for any project or something that you may come up with during the year that you don't have contingency for, or that you want to budget, and then we would reduce that undesignated for that project.
And did we use it in this last year?
Last year.
Okay, okay. I was thinking contingency, you're correct.
Please.
I totally agree with Kyla. We have both been with the city long enough, her as an employee, me as a council member, and we've both seen the revolving door and people flee Cottonwood. And after they were trained, and it cost an awful lot to bring these people back up. And just a person that may work at the sewer plant, the water, whatever, you've still got to train them. And when you lose good people because of, like she said, the 1% or cut them, they will leave.
We talk about reducing merit, and I understand it's a reduction in how it was previously funded, but it's, I mean, still a 4% raise. It still is a raise, and I understand that we want to remain competitive. But if you compare that to the majority of other merit programs that we reviewed, I think it still is a competitive merit program.
I agree.
What was the average merit received last year?
4%.
4%.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to remind the council of the list of capital requests we had that we're now only funding 3 of these. And just a reminder that these aren't requests that just disappear. I mean, they're somewhere down the road, they're going to need to be funded. And we're talking about things like replacing the EKG machines for the fire department, replacing the body cameras for the police department, buying additional rapid flash beacons on Main Street, replacing parking lot lights with LEDs, EMS equipment for the fire department. So again, I mean, this was about $400,000 worth of capital requests that we cut out of the budget to try and make these percentages work for the council as much as possible. Again, the problem with that is we're just deferring replacement or the purchase of items that really are needed eventually sometime, somewhere.
Are there any other comments on this proposal here? Are we generally okay with this, or are we?
I'm okay with it.
You're okay with it?
Not with the 1%. I'm okay with everything else. I'm not okay with the 1% reduction
In the merit?
in the merit.
And I know that 3 of us here tonight were not in favor of the 0.5 increase in general terms. So, but your input on this is still critical to us being able to make a decision tonight. See, I told you it was going to be like this.
I'm in.
I guess our hope is just that, you know, if we put this in the budget and we bring the budget to you, that you'll be okay with that budget.
You don't need all 7 of us, so. I just, you know, said my piece.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I've said it again, I'll say it many more times, that I think this is probably going to go down in history as one of the most difficult, well, next year we'll see, but
Yeah.
one of the more difficult budgets to pass.
No doubt.
There is still just a lot of light between us all. And so, you know, I like I said, I am not 100% happy, I'm not grinning ear to ear
No,
over this. I don't
absolutely
think any one of us are, but, we need to try to get this to a point where we can get the budget approved.
You gotta do it.
And they did exactly what we asked them to do.
Okay. And I do keep my eye on that fiscal year 2019, 2020, where we do increase. I understand we're trying to get through a bump in the road now, but I think all of us would be a lot more comfortable sitting up here today if we put more of that 0.5% increase toward those things that at least our constituents have said is critical, like infrastructure, et cetera.
Right. Absolutely.
And though it'll be up to a new council, I think this at least indicates that that's the direction that we're headed, which is reassuring. I think almost all of us have spoken here tonight. Is there anybody else on council that would like to share their thoughts? Does council feel, or does the staff have enough direction from us?
Just, again, since thankfully I won't be here next year to enjoy this event, I will share with the council that for the sake of optics, because I think that's what's happening here, is cutting the merit increase. While it sends great messages to those in the community that want to see us cut, because they have this perception, not a reality. They have this perception that, our employees are way overpaid. I think the message you send to the employees, who really are a dedicated group of people who do provide that service that we all come to expect, and that level of service that we come to expect, it does have a tendency to send that message that what they do is less important and less appreciated. And as Kyla indicated, there are costs to that. There are ramifications to that, which far exceed the $80,000 you're going to save on this. So just something to think about.
And at least from my perspective, I'm not at all indicating by suggesting that we look at the merit program that our employees don't perform well, above average, and many of them perform exceptionally well. However, I think the merit program, even if we do reduce it to 4%, I think is still competitive for the area. I think the whole concept of a merit program, of course, is to reward exceptional behavior. Still think we can adjust the scale, and I don't think that the city employees are overpaid. I think there are many that scrap by like the rest of us. However, 4% merit increase on a salary that's over $100,000 has a much greater impact to us, and is much more difficult to sustain than 4% on the $30,000 a year salary. So again, I think there's room to still have an exceptional, effective merit program in place, but adjust it somewhat, adjust the range, adjust the scale, make sure that it's still effective, but also it gets us through this tough patch. I think this slicing off a 1% was I think a first stab at that. It may not have been the best solution. I think there might be other ways to see that same amount of savings, but without slicing 1% off the top, essentially. But anyway, that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
And when council does evaluate the four that are our employees, that 4% doesn't have to be 4%. It's up to the city council. So the higher paid ones in the city may not get the 4, they might get 2 or 3 to justify the rest of it.
They haven't been receiving anything over the last several years.
I know.
So really, this cut is not going to do anything for those high costs. It's going to still affect the little guy.
Does that work for you, Mr. Rodriguez?
We will make it work.
Okay.
So just to confirm, this plan, the council is giving direction to go ahead and proceed with this plan.
I do want to express one thing, and Doug and I had spoken about this. I had a concern about our economic development director's assistant, who far and away pays for herself and brings quite a bit of income into the city, most likely due to her work. She was hired via a grant, and the agreement on filling that position was to get another grant for her. And I talked to Doug and Rudy about, is there a way to actually get her a paid position? And the fact was, the agreement was that she needed to have a grant in order to continue working for the city, and I understand. And I had to step back from that. I still think we need somebody in there that can do what she does, and the amount of benefit that she provides to the city is exceptional, but I know I have to pick my battles. So I just had to mention that because I know Casey's going to come after me tomorrow. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, any members of the public wish to address the council on this item tonight before we move on? Okay, good luck. We'll move on to item 3, resolution number 2944, declaring those certain documents titled Administration of the International Building Code 2012 edition, International Building Code 2012 edition, amendments made in the International Building Code, International Residential Code 2012 edition, Fuel Gas Code 2012 edition, International Plumbing Code 2012 edition, National Electric Code 2011 edition, International Mechanical Code 2012 edition, International Energy Conservation Code 2012 edition, and International Fire Code 2015 edition to be public records. Ms. Najad, it's a mouthful.
Baron Najad, Community Development Director. Building Department has been functioning under the 2009 International Building Code, and it was about time for us to come to code and raise it to 2012 because all the neighboring jurisdictions were functioning on the 2012. So that this will be easier for the building community. They come to our jurisdiction, it is different, and they go to other jurisdiction, it's different. So now it was time for us to be complying with the other jurisdictions. So we've been working on this one more than a year right now, and with different departments, and especially with the fire department. And also there was a third-party company. It was Shams Koda. Now it's Adam's session is here from that company, and now it changed the name. And also city attorney reviewed the final product. Again, so many people and departments were involved. Again, this is straightforward document. We came with this final document that complies with the code and with the surrounding communities, and especially with the county and other jurisdictions. So it should be straightforward. And if you have any questions, Adam Session is here to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from council? I think it is pretty straightforward that we should be with the rest of the pack as far as where we fall in the International Building Code.
And Mr. Mayor, if you thought the title was a mouthful, these codes run hundreds of pages.
Hundreds and hundreds of pages.
Well, it's only 7 o'clock. I mean. All right, there's no questions, and gentlemen here tonight, would you care to present on this, or nope? Okay, you're good. All right, I think we're all good.
Motion?
Sure.
I move to approve resolution number 2944.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Aldhouse made the motion. Councilmember Norman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Deputy Clerk, please read resolution number 2944 by title only.
Resolution number 2944, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, declaring those certain documents titled Administration of the International Building Code 2012 edition, International Building Code 2012 edition, amendments made in the International Building Code, International Residential Code 2012 edition, Fuel Gas Code 2012 edition, International Plumbing Code 2012 edition, National Electrical Code 2011 edition, International Mechanical Code 2012 edition, International Energy Conservation Code 2012 edition, and International Fire Code 2012 edition to be public records. Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Okay, up next, item 4, under new business, ordinance number 640, amending Title 15, Buildings and Construction of the Municipal Code to update the city's uniform building, fire, and technical codes. First reading.
Well, there's nothing to add to it. It's the same code.
Okay, moving up from 2009 to 12. So,
I just had a question.
sure.
This amendment, or there's a proposal to amend amusement buildings to include events. So a fire sprinkler, a fully operational and functional fire sprinkler and smoke detection system is required for events, but it doesn't really clearly define events. Can you explain kind of what the
I will
intent of
refer
this
to
amendment?
Fire Chief, this question.
I have it up on my iPad if you'd like to see it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed some of the question.
It's Chapter 1, Section 105.
Amendments to the fire code, is this correct? Is that
Yes,
what you're looking at, the
correct.
amendments to the fire code?
Would you like to see my iPad, Chief? I have it up.
Oh. This may be. Yes, that's the, okay, I have that there.
Okay.
I'll be able to address that. This is an amendment to the, these are the amendments that the fire marshal especially did a lot of work on this. This is an amendment to the International Fire Code to, all the amendments are to be specifically more for our community, because sometimes the International Code may be either more restrictive. Usually it's just a matter of difference between that. Now, what is the question on it? This is for amusement buildings and events. This is primarily to look at like haunted houses and those type of things, which are very high fire dangers. So we'll kind of ensure that we have the proper fire sprinkler and smoke detections so that people utilize the proper structures to have these kind of things. This is no different than what we would require any other commercial building to have.
So, but is this directed at a new, say, for example, because you list as the examples, Chief, a haunted house and an indoor maze. Those are the two examples of amusement buildings and events. So is this for a new indoor maze company comes to Cottonwood and builds a maze, or is it going to affect, for example, our haunted house if we moved location, or a nonprofit putting on some kind of a festival or carnival type temporary event?
I'm sorry? It would be any time, like anything else in the code, based on, and we went through this before. This is where you start with this. These can be waived by discretion of the fire chief or the fire code official, the fire marshal, the fire chief can make exceptions to these codes. But I believe that's already in there. The wording we just changed a little bit, I believe, from the actual International Fire Code was probably even more restrictive in the 12 code itself than what we did here, to give us a little more latitude. But to best answer your question, yes, they're one of the most dangerous things out there, to be honest with you, are these types of these mazes and things like that, because you're putting a bunch of children and others in there with the potential to start a fire. So we're certainly probably more cautious in that than we are a lot of things. We're not looking to put people out of business. We're saying put it in the right facility, put it in a building that should be safe for everybody to be in. And that's the best answer I've got for you on that, to be honest. We're not trying to necessarily preclude them, but these are businesses. What worries me is sometimes is these kind of businesses come in, an out-of-town company, let's say, comes in and wants to put in a maze or something like that in a building that they really shouldn't be in. Something we would never allow somebody in our own community, a contractor, to come in and do that. They would be required to meet these things, and we want the same thing certainly for these instances. So that's kind of where I'm looking at this from.
And I appreciate the concern for safety, and I'm glad that that's paramount, but I am concerned that this is rather vague language. For example, if we have a carnival come to the fair and they have one of those indoor little trailers that is a
Believe it
mini.
or not, most all those have built-in sprinkler systems because nobody will let them put them in without them. They have portable sprinkler systems in those, in the carnival ones.
Yes.
We go out and inspect them and do that.
And I appreciate that explanation, but this language is pretty vague. It just says haunted houses, indoor mazes, etc. So it just seems really subject to a lot of interpretation. Thank you.
Okay. And I do understand your concern. Our concern, of course, is more importantly is fire safety and those, again, the way everything that's in here is because of issues that have happened around the country and do it. We can, if you want it removed, I mean, I'm open to looking at that and the direction the council wants to go with it and gives direction on that. But from our standpoint, I guess I say I stand pat on it. We have the ability to give some exceptions to these things, but if you don't have it in the rule to protect them up front, then I feel like we're leaving ourselves open from a liability standpoint.
And I don't want to change it. I was just trying to have some clarification about what is, I mean, events is very vague. That's it. It just seems as though there are a lot of scenarios where this would be applicable, and we may end up having to not have a lot of.
When you look at amusement building, and I should have brought the 12th fire code with me, and I apologize, I didn't. When you look at amusement building, it's fairly specific as to what it's talking about. This isn't going to affect any of the outdoor activities where they put up tents, walking on Main and those type of things. That's not at all what this is meant to do.
Okay.
That's not the intent here. The intent here is for a fixed building where somebody comes in and sets up something like that, or if somebody want to come in and put the biggest thing they're looking at here is typically the haunted house type situations and do that. It won't affect any of the events that we have up and down Main Street and those things.
All right, thank you, Chief.
I hope I answered it the best I could. Okay.
It was a bit vague. I think that even if we were to say indoor events or something, it might kind of narrow it in a little bit, but I understand you want to leave it open.
More to do, yeah. When we say the events, again, it's because some people would argue that if the building is used for that all the time, it's an event in a building, but they don't think they should have to be held to the standard that we would have for anybody else coming into the building. Does that make sense? I want somebody to rent the old TG&Y building, put in a haunted house if it didn't have sprinklers in it, because they come into town and do that, and we don't have any control over it because they didn't have to go through the building department and the normal processes of code review and design review and all those things, because they're coming in and setting up something temporary, and they're saying, I'm not changing the building, I'm just setting up an event in here.
Right.
It gives us the latitude to deal with them and make them do it fire safety without going through, because they don't go through all the rest of the process. I hope I answered it.
You did. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor, to Ms. Henry's point, we could certainly, at the council's pleasure, proceed, and staff can look at this definition and maybe proposing a clarifying amendment. And we could not move forward and come back, with the whole thing, or we can move forward and come back maybe with a clarifying amendment.
I don't know if, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I agree it's kind of vague. I understand the reasons for it to be vague is so that you can give latitude to get in there and address any concerns. I think, it appeals directly to the fire marshal, I think, if I read that correctly. So I just don't want to be in a situation where there's a good-natured group of youth commissioners that want to put on a haunted house and the city comes down heavy-handed and wags their finger and says, not in our town, they're a youngster, and I'd hate to see that kind of thing happen, because then we'll hear about it, and they can't appeal to anyone but staff, and so council's unaware, and we certainly don't want to shut down those operations, but we want to make sure they're safe, and that's the main thing. So.
And I'm comfortable with the explanation that Chief gave and a little bit of the, background and.
There is, and as part of it, there is an appeal process, and we have an appeal process. That's built into the code. I don't know if you went through all that stuff that you're supposed to read. There is an appeal process to do that. Again, it's not meant to be heavy-handed in that. It is meant to give us the latitude to protect the public, especially, again, for those, for people who may not have to go through the rest of the process and can come in and put up something on, and that happens, unfortunately, around the country, and why the codes are written and why they're done the way they are is to protect. I wouldn't worry about the people who come through code review and do all that, because we had a chance to do all those things. It's when somebody comes in and rents a building and just says, we're putting this in there, and we need to have the latitude to say, well, no, that's not a safe building to do this. It's kind of like, we kind of went through this a little bit when we had to make the exception for the sleeping, for the homeless shelter thing. You know, we look for the fire safety first, but we're flexible enough to look and do that as long as we can provide for the safety and do that.
Okay, I think we're good. Yeah.
We're good.
Okay. All right, then I would move, oh, it's first reading, excuse me, so. All right, then, good to have the deputy clerk please read ordinance number 640 by title only.
Ordinance number 640, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending Title 15 Buildings and Construction of the Municipal Code to update the city's uniform building, fire, and technical codes. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Last is item 5, updated Title 6 implementation plan for the Cottonwood area transit system. Evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Bruce Merrill, Transit Manager. We have to go through this process every now and then. ADOT makes changes, FTA makes changes, so we have to revise. They have what they call a template for their plan, and we abide by their template. So they made a little tweak here and a little tweak there, so we had to make a little tweak on ours. So basically that's what this amounts to. I'm required by ADOT to get approval from the council, because you're our governing board, to say okey dokey on our changes that we made. And then I have to submit all that stuff to ADOT. It was nothing real major. There were a couple of sentences they wanted us to change wording on, and a couple of little wording changes that they made in their template. And so that's why we had to bring it to you folks to say okay. So it was nothing real major.
Yeah. All right. Anything stands out that you want to share with us, or it's pretty much
it's pretty much cut and dried. There was nothing real. I mean, if it had been really big, I would have pointed it out, but really I made a couple of paragraph changes of wording, and that's about it, what it amounted to. I removed one line that they didn't like, and there was one table that they didn't like, and I took those out and submitted it to them, and they were fine with it after that. So basically,
all right.
I think this happens every couple of years where you come back to us, and it's mostly it's just verbiage. It's not operational changes. It's just whoever the new guy is wants changed. Yeah.
It's rarely anything major.
All right.
Can I make a motion?
Please.
I move to approve the updated Title VI implementation plan as presented.
Second.
Vice Mayor Allen made the motion. Councilmember Norman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed?
You.
Good work.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Move to pay the claims and adjustment.
I'll second that. Councilmember Henry made the motion. Mayor seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.